Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse, the Thursday, April 17th edition of the Daily Pulse. I'm your host, Teddy Panos, coming to you from the WellPoint Studios here in beautiful, historic downtown Lowell. It's a bright, sunny day out there. A little chillier than we might like, but we're heading to some better days ahead in the immediate future and, of course, our longer-term future as well. So grin and bear with us. And hey, it's always a sunny day here in the WellPoint Studios because we always have great things to talk about. And today we're going to talk about, well, what a lot of people kind of term our most valuable resource here in the city of Lowell, our kids, our future, our students, our schools. And who better to chat about with that than the superintendent of the Lowell Public Schools, Superintendent Liam Skinner. Thanks for joining us again here on the Daily Pulse.
I always enjoy our conversations. That was a great setup because, yes, our students are our future, our greatest resource. So, yeah, I'm delighted to talk about that.
And we are always as well. And a reminder to folks, this is going to be a monthly feature with Superintendent Skinner. We've already booked May and June, and we had you on last month. But today, rather than get into some of the hot button newsy issues, though we might if time allows at the end of it, I wanted to talk about kind of what I'm dubbing, and you can agree or disagree with it, the central tenet, the central theme of your administration since you became superintendent. And that's something you've mentioned in the past, a culture of continuous improvement. I want to delve into exactly what that means, what the goals are, and how you've already implemented it, and so on and so forth. We're going to start that discussion in a quick second. Let me just quickly thank our Daily Pulse sponsors, Ray Booten, licensed realtor, Massachusetts and New Hampshire, certified appraiser in both states as well. You can find him online at realestaterayBooten.com. Thank you as well to our friends at WellPoint. WellPoint, the only health plan offering healthcare benefits exclusively to Massachusetts GIC members at WellPoint. Your whole health is their whole point. We got a few other sponsors to thank as well. I'll do that in a minute. But speaking of WellPoint, the last time we saw each other was in the Stocklosa School, where a couple of your teachers were honored as hometown heroes by WellPoint. They were former classroom quarterbacks, a feature we do here at Inside Lowell. But man, they made out like fiends. Tickets to Bruins games, autographed pucks by David Pasternak, all this swag and, what do they call those giant things that keep your water cold even if you drop it in a volcano? The
Teddy,
families.
It's great. I'm delighted for those two teachers at the Stocklosa who were honored. They deserve all that swag and much more, but they deserve the recognition. I'm delighted that WellPoint and at that case, I think it was
98.5 the Sports Hub, yeah.
I'm delighted that they're recognizing those teachers because they're also sort of recognizing teaching and the whole profession.
Yes.
And the really, really terrific and very important work that all of our teachers do every day. It was great.
Yeah, it was awesome to see the students' reaction. The teachers were surprised. I don't know how you tricked them into coming down together into the auditorium, but their students were already there, and it was just great to see the reaction. Humble ladies, but they deserve. The teachers are our everyday heroes in the classrooms, and they control our future, as we kicked off today by saying.
Absolutely wonderful to see them recognized, and as you said, humble. The vast majority of our staff are, they're in a classroom every day. We're not out there in the public to be seen and so on. Teachers are not, at least, but they deserve every bit of that recognition. I'm delighted that we were able to do it.
Yes, they do. All right, let's get to you and your leadership. And you're getting close to your second year, if I'm not mistaken, in the summer?
In my second year, I'll have completed 2 years this summer.
Yeah, so this part of it was as an interim superintendent, but then you got a contract, and you immediately kind of set about with this theme called a culture of continuous improvement, something you wanted to spread throughout the entire school system. And we'll get into what it is, but I want to give you a chance to define that for those who are watching, those who are learning about this, hearing about it for the first time. What is a culture of continuous improvement?
Well, there's a lot to it, Ted. So you'll have to stop me occasionally and pump me for more questions, or there's a lot to it. So first of all, I really believe in continuous improvement. Any fellow or woman or leader who comes into town and tells you, we're going to be the best school district in the state of Massachusetts, or we're going to be top dog and so on, to some extent, people can come in and try to turn everything upside down and get great growth and so on. And there are even times where some of that seems to work, but even if it seems to work, it never lasts. What does last is culture. And it's very difficult to establish. It takes a long time to establish really well, but culture really, really lasts. We're going to get, you can put your emphasis on individual initiatives. And we're going to get new curriculum, for example. That's a really worthwhile initiative. We're going to introduce some professional development. It's a really worthwhile initiative. But all of those in and of themselves, and even combined together, are not as important as the culture. And the culture we refer to is a culture of continuous improvement. We're always working to get better in our classrooms, in our schools, as a district, than we are today.
Okay. Now, one of the common mistake that folks might make, because I made it, I thought that, well, this involved the continuous improvement of the students to show that they're learning. The test scores are going up, the grades are going up, graduation rates, attendance rates, etc. This is actually for your staff, your teachers, your paras, your administrators, everybody. Correct?
Yes, but don't exclude those students. It's all about the students. It's all about the students. We're here for them. We're motivated to help our students succeed. And if you have a classroom of students who, where some of them were not as successful as others, part of the continuous improvement is making sure that success gets to all the others as well. But yes, of course, it involves all of us adults putting our efforts into improving what we do.
How do you implement this? You've got 26, 27 different school buildings at a variety of levels, and some of them have certain specialties. Is this across the board? Is this going from preschool and K through 12, or are you starting at certain levels and then implementing it as in new levels as we go along here?
It's across the board, Teddy. And so how do you implement it? First and foremost, I think you do have to define it. Culture, we talk about culture, and my favorite definition of culture is the way we do things around here. And I can give you a story on that in a minute if you like. Let me get into it. The story is that we worked in my school at one stage on being respectful, a respectful environment when the environment and the moment wasn't very respectful. And we worked on it for years. And then one day, a new student arrived at our school, sat in the back of the class, and as soon as the lesson started, began to disrupt the teacher. And two students that were sitting right in front of that boy turned around and said, "We don't do that here," right? And there was two students. That was a culture moment. That was a moment where the talking about being respectful had gotten to the level where the students were embodying it and saying it to their colleague, a new kid who came to it, right? But you have to define it. In that case, the definition had to do with being respectful. For a culture of continuous improvement, you need to act certain ways. You have to have certain dispositions, and we need to have certain structures or practices that help it to flourish. And I can define them for you, and that's part of what we do. So let me define them for you. We believe you have to have a growth mindset. We believe that you have to work with a mindset towards intentional collaboration. We believe that you have to be responsible. So those are three mindsets we really put our efforts into. The structures or the practices are collaborative structures. You can't ask people to collaborate and then not give them time or space to do that work in. So we have to create that collaborative structures. We have to use data. We have to have some coaching. If people are going to improve and get better, you have to help them coach. And for our students, we have to have safety nets. So there are three dispositions and there are four structures or practices that define what we call a culture of continuous improvement.
All right. I'm going to get into those and further define what they mean, but I smiled when you told the story of the classroom and the other students turning around and telling the other student, that's not how we operate here. That's not something new. That's not something that works just in the academic world or whatever. Coaches do that. Teams do that. They establish a culture. And the best example that I can cite is the New England Patriots in the heyday of their dynasty, where you would often hear that the coaches didn't didn't even have to do a lot of this. They had certain key veteran players in each room, at each, in each position, in each meeting, that would do that for them. And it's far more effective when a message comes from your peers, whether those peers are professional athletes,
that's right,
or students or fellow teachers. When that comes from them, it's much more effective and easier to implement than when some boss is telling you this, you have to do it because this is what we're demanding or asking of you. It's your job. If you do it because you take pride in it, man, you're more likely to succeed.
So there was a day, Teddy, back, I don't know when, but there was a time before that dynasty of the New England Patriots when on a Monday morning, a coach could call a player in to talk about an error that he made in the game on Sunday. And maybe the player said, "Hey, coach, why are you picking on me? Why are you giving me a hard time over that?" Right? Later on, during the dynasty years, when a player was called into the office to talk about a mistake they made in a game before, the player was interested in learning about it and interested in figuring out how to avoid making that type of error. The culture had shifted, and the players were knowing and accepting of the fact that they were going to be expected to improve, and they welcomed the idea that they were going to get coaching to help them improve. That was a shift in the culture, and it was towards a more successful culture.
Yeah, there was the example that popped into my mind was, so I used to go post game, we'd go into the locker room, and the players would come in and out of the showers kind of on their own schedule. But that particular game, there was some rookie, and he became an inconsequential player. I don't even remember his name. That's how inconsequential he was. But he had a great game. He made a couple of great games, and he was talking, and he had, what happens, the media scrum, 20 reporters start sticking their microphone in his face, and he's talking, and he's talking, and he's talking, and he's this was his big day, probably his only great day as an NFL football player. And then Willie McGinnis walks out of the shower, a giant of a man, arguably the most imposing physical specimen I've ever seen, wrapped in nothing but a towel. And he's walking across the locker room, and I can see him. I make eye contact, and he's looking at the gaggle of reporters and the kid. And he starts to develop this sneer. And as he walks by me and the group, he says, loud enough for the kid to hear, "Rookies should be seen, not heard." And the kid immediately said, "Okay, guys, that's the end of the interview. I'm done." And we all just dispersed. And again, if the coach said that, the kid might get pissed and say, "Hey, why are you taking away my moment in the sun?" When one of his peers said it. The kid immediately ended the interview. And I guess you can kind of make all sorts of analogies, but to me, that's what popped to mind when you said that about the students doing that in the classroom.
So you may at some point say, "I wonder when you figure you've got this culture established in Lowell, Liam," right? And the answer would be not when I say it, but when teachers or school leaders say it, and when they look for this culture of continuous improvement and propagate it themselves. It's not something that should come from top down, but it's something that we can inspire and we can support staff to develop.
And maybe sticks around long after you're done as the school superintendent, right?
Yes, culture is one of these things that takes a long, long time to establish, but it also lasts for a long time. And so a culture of continuous improvement properly implemented and people buying into it would really benefit our city and our school department for a long time, and would outlast the implications or the benefits of any one initiative such as professional development or curriculum adoption and so forth. The culture itself would inspire growth and continuous improvement if it's well established.
All right, we're chatting with Lowell School Superintendent Liam Skinner. We're talking about his culture of continuous improvement. We're going to delve into more exactly what that means and how do you implement it, which I find to be the biggest challenge. Let's just quickly thank our Daily Pulse sponsors, all of them here. Ray Booten, licensed realtor, Massachusetts and New Hampshire. You can find them online, realestaterayBooten.com. Thank you to our friends at WellPoint. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. Washington Savings Bank, banking that feels like home. Make the switch now to Washington Savings Bank. TMI Properties, quality and value at every price point. Find your perfect space with TMI. Mahoney Oil, providing warmth and protection to Greater Lowell and Southern New Hampshire since 1925. The Greater Lowell Community Foundation, improving the quality of life in Greater Lowell through strategic, impactful philanthropy. Francis E. Preventure Insurance, the agency Greater Lowell has counted on since 1982 to insure its most valued assets, and by the Massachusetts Pirates, who bring all the hard-hitting action and excitement of arena football to downtown Lowell and the Mill City. We're back with Superintendent of Schools Liam Skinner. So the word that jumped out to me that pops up more often than any other in your little description here and what you said is collaboration. Collaboration. How, and I'm going to go back to kind of my question. How do you get people to collaborate? Are we talking about in each individual classroom, in each individual school building, or across the district? I imagine there's multiple layers of collaboration that need to go into this strategy.
So for any of the elements in sort of a culture collaboration is definitely one of them. Growth mindset is another. Use of data and coaching, all the ways that we define it. To make those things established and get them to be accepted and established practice, you have to say it. So you have the superintendent right now is going to say it, and he's going to talk about collaboration, or he's going to talk about data use, all of those elements. You have to model it. So one of the dispositions is responsibility. And that means a lot of things, but it means, for example, that a teacher would feel responsible for the students in their classroom to learn. That might sound like a no-brainer, right? But it's possible, and we've seen teachers, in the past who feel like, that kid didn't really make a strong effort today. That's not my fault as a teacher that they didn't learn. The parent didn't feed them breakfast. The kid was distracted. That's not my fault as a teacher. Taking responsibility means that the teacher feels responsible for the students in the room to learn, regardless of the conditions. The conditions matter, but you will take different actions if you feel responsible. It also means that the superintendent of schools has to be responsible and has to feel responsible for the success of our schools in our district, right? But so how do you get those things to happen? You have to say it, like I'm saying it now to Teddy Panos, right? You have to model it. So again, I can't say the teacher should be responsible if I don't model it in my work, and the school principals and leaders don't model it. You have to model it. You have to organize for it. So one of the ways I'm organizing for it right now is by establishing what it is and what it looks like and talking about it with Teddy Panos. You have to protect it. So you'll have people who'll argue against you. You don't need to collaborate. I know what I'm doing in my classroom. I don't have to collaborate with my colleagues. You have to protect it because you have to get involved in those situations and help that person to see it differently. And then you have to reward it. You have to, we see examples of staff who are doing wonderful collaborative work. We have to point that up and we have to reward that. So these are the ways that you establish that culture.
Oh, so what phase of this are you in? You've said it. I assume if you've said it to me, then you've certainly said it to the school committee and to the staff. Have you begun implementing it?
Yes.
What was like the first step, and when do you actually do it? Is this the work that goes on those half days when we have to go pick up our kids early from school? Is this what you do on those professional development days, or when do you implement it?
Good question. So you begin at day one, Teddy. But it's not across the districts. It's not established day one. There's not a timeline where you can establish this. It's a process over time. So this year, for example, I outlined for all staff and sent them an email message once a month about this stuff, beginning with the first definition and then asking them to give me feedback on it. And we've tweaked. So I've given you a definition, and it includes, for example, one of these structures is safety nets. How do we catch students who are not being successful and come in with an intervention before they fail, right? But that didn't exist in the original definition that we were putting out in Lowell Public Schools. There was something else in its place. I got feedback on that from staff. And so this year I've been emailing staff, and I've been talking about it in different forums with some coaches and with some people at central office and with leaders. Next year we'll do more. Next year, we may do some of the rewarding of it. We may have examples of it that I'll be talking to Teddy Panos on his podcast about. And so it's a process over time. How will we know when it's established? How will we know when we're done? First of all, it'll never be done because you always have to work on your culture. But you'll know it's well established when teachers and others can tell you what is important in our culture and what are the practices that make it work.
Do you have a time frame in mind for when you will actually start to see the results in the classroom and in your teaching rooms?
Yes and no. We already see it. We see pockets of it. Before I ever came to be superintendent, there were great pockets of it. So, for example, I'm going to promote collaboration and collaborative structures where teachers can work together to support one another, right? Some of that existed before I ever became superintendent, but it might have been in pockets, it might not have been widespread, and it might not have been deeply held as an improvement strategy that was really part of a continuous improvement culture. So this is being more purposeful about it. This is being defining it more clearly and making it part of how we do business in Lowell Public Schools. So at what point will it be established? To some extent, it's already established in some places. Part of it is building it and making it generalized, accepted practice for how we do business.
How has it been received? How many people work for the Lowell Public Schools? Thousands, right? So
That's right.
So you gave an example of folks provided feedback, and you took that and adjusted, kind of your model. Are there some folks who are like, that guy's crazy? I don't know. None of this will never work, and you're getting pushback. What's the reaction been?
So the reaction has been very positive in that. So for example, when I send out these emails once a month about this, I get overwhelmingly positive response. But the email that I send goes out to all the thousands of employees in the district, and it's unusual for somebody to send a critique. I welcome that, by the way, when they do, but it's very seldom. That doesn't mean anything about how well the message has been received or implemented, right? Because people receive emails all the time. Half the staff in Lowell Public Schools could delete that message without ever having read it, for crying out loud. That's not how you establish the culture. It's a beginning. It's a way to share with people what your thoughts are and to ask them to engage. And then several people have engaged. Lots and lots of people have not. It'll take time.
I imagine the first step was getting to all the principals, right? Because then you can't be in 20-something different school buildings at once, and an email is great.
That's right.
But face-to-face daily interaction, which the principals have. So would you say that your principals are where you hope they would be at this point, and actively implementing the measures that you're hoping will be successful?
Everybody is where we want them to be at this point, in the sense that we have really committed, strong leaders in our schools. We have incredibly committed teachers in our schools. The things they do for students, Teddy, it's remarkable. And we get into that in more detail as well. But it doesn't, if they have not yet worked in a district or a school where you're expected to be responsible, or where you're expected to work with a coach, then it's not necessarily that those adults' fault, right? So yes, I have begun by having conversations with principals, and as I said, many of the principals will have embodied these very identifiers of continuous improvement right along. But it's together as a group. If I do the good work of collaboration with those folks, we can make it a better culture of continuous improvement.
Right. You've said the words growth mindset a couple of times. I hear that, and I hear, well, that's professional development. Is there a difference?
Yes. So growth mindset is one of the three key dispositions that we talk about in a culture of continuous improvement. Growth mindset, Teddy, means that I believe that you can learn something, even though you struggle. And there's 100 ways of demonstrating a growth mindset. One of them, believe it or not, is smiling. Do you know that teachers smile in their interactions with students? They smile more for students who are successful students and for students who they believe in. If a teacher doesn't, so-called like a student or doesn't believe in that student, they're not as inclined to smile. That's a completely under the radar, nobody's counting that or measuring that. But if a teacher has a growth mindset, they will persist with the child. if you're somebody's having difficulty learning something, Teddy, and I've explained it to you and you've been part of the lesson and you don't understand at the end of that lesson, part of the being responsible part is say, I'm going to be responsible for the fact that you didn't learn it. I'm going to think about how to teach you differently. But a growth mindset means I believe you can still get there. And I'm going to tell you that, Teddy, I'm sorry you don't understand what we're doing right now. Let's come back to it a different way. If I believe in you, I'm going to say something like that instead of the opposite of growth mindset, which would be, poor Teddy didn't get it. Let's move on next, right? And so it's being persistent and so forth.
Hey, look, all this sounds great. I can't see how anybody would argue about any of the goals. I think the methods that you're hoping to use to get there will prove successful. But how is this? Is this like just kind of a theory that's being tested for the first time, or is there some type of scientific data or empirical evidence that shows that some of the things that you've said are actually accurate? You talked about teachers smiling. They tend to smile more for the students that are not giving them headaches than the ones who give them headaches and whatnot. Do you have some data to back this up? Because I would imagine some people will question you on it, right?
So literally, yes, there's data and research on all of these things. I didn't come up with it by myself, right? So a growth mindset, for example, is very much tied to student success, particularly in environments where students are more struggling, like, for example, in urban settings where there's a lot of poverty, where there's a lot of disabilities and English language learner needs. These are the environments where a growth mindset is more important than anywhere else. There's lots of research on that.
Okay. And what data will you use to judge if this is working? You said you're already kind of seeing it work and be implemented, but ultimately if the student grades don't improve and graduation rates, attendance figures, all these things we've discussed, then I can argue, yeah, nice, it sounded great, but it didn't make any difference. How are you going to judge? How are you going to take responsibility? A word that you used as one of the central tenets of this. How are you going to judge whether this is being effective or if you need to shift gears and try something else?
So, great question. You will see it, Teddy. It's not a specific measure necessarily. In the first example I gave you about a respectful environment in a school, if I were to try to convince you that trust me, the environment in the school became more respectful, that's not nearly as convincing as telling you that 2 students turned around to correct the other student. Now, if in other classrooms the students were, being very disruptive, that wouldn't be very convincing either. But you'll see it and you'll hear it when people talk about it who are not Liam Skinner, when people, teachers in schools and leaders in schools talk about it. And you will see it in student results. And you're also right about, I have to be responsible for those results. So among the ways I could answer the question are and this is one of the traits of continuous improvement, is that we also use data. So the data practices are part of a culture of continuous improvement. And the data practices are the very same for when you are being incredibly successful and when you're not being successful. It just means you look at results. Actual data could be at the end of my lesson today, I'm going to give students a quick 3-question quiz to figure out if they understood the central tenet of the lesson. Or it could be superintendent of schools is looking at the MCAS results for the whole district. When we're being successful, we look at all that data and we figure out that even in the most successful year or even in the most successful lesson, some students will not have made it. And we're going to get into our data and figure out who those students are and what we're going to do for them. It's the same approach if students didn't do well. If we're having a bad year and the results aren't good, we're going to look at who are the students that did not do well that year and what are we going to do about it. So it's attitudes and practices that are always going to be present in our system, part of a continuous improvement culture.
Yeah. So it's easy to grade the students, as you mentioned, quiz tests, the MCAS tests, or whatever is coming. How are you going to accurately grade the teachers, though, and how they're following along in this? I should say the educators, because there are a number of things that go into the test scores of students, right? home life, parental involvement. You mentioned not having breakfast and, going to school hungry as opposed to whatnot. So how do you kind of judge each of these teachers? How do you grade them, for lack of a better term, in how they're doing what you've laid out?
I'm not interested in grading the teachers, Teddy. We have terrific teachers. And I believe that what the teachers need more than anything else is support. They don't need judging, and they don't need to be ranked and so forth. They need support. We know that teachers are successful because our students are successful. Ultimately, that's the goal, right? And it's possible, yes, it's possible that a teacher, despite their best efforts, may not be have students being successful in their classroom. We have to work with that teacher. But in a culture of continuous improvement, it is not about judging and rating. It's about getting everyone on board with a particular set of practices and dispositions that we know are successful, and that are more successful if everybody embodies them and embraces them, and become a part of the way we do business in Lowell Public Schools.
You've set up safety nets, as you mentioned, for some of the students who may be, falling behind and not, keeping up. Are there safety nets that will help some of your educators?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Teddy Panos is a struggling teacher. He's new to this particular role, and he's having a difficult time with classroom management, for example. Safety nets for you, you would have, let's set you up with a mentor teacher, Teddy. Some really expert teacher, veteran teacher who's going to be able to drop into your room once in a while, give you some tips, bring you into my classroom so you can see how I do it. I'm a veteran teacher, right? So there's that support. There's coaching. So in our middle schools and elementary schools and in the high school, there are different people who act as coaches. We call them instructional specialists or literacy specialists. Sometimes we have math resource teachers. Whichever of those you fall into, one of those coaching folks can come along and give you help. Also, the principal and assistant principal can be in your classroom and give you feedback as well. That gets a little bit closer to, evaluative, because that's what the principals and assistant principals do. Ultimately, they'll give you an evaluation report, but they can also be your coaches. So yes, the growth mindset applies to teachers too.
All right. Is there a place in this culture for the folks? We've talked a lot about the classroom, the teachers and the paras who are in the classroom. What about the rest of the staff, maintenance and custodial staff, your physical education teachers, your cafeteria
Absolutely.
workers? Are they all part of this group email and everything that you send out?
Everyone is, Teddy. Everyone is. And yes, it'll take time to get to all areas. But so for any of those people, for any of them, you could say, what data are you using to judge your success? And let's say it's a cafeteria worker who says, well, we're going to turn out, such and such a many meals with how many options for different students, and we're going to serve lunch within a certain period of time, right? You can make up metrics and you can follow them, and you can set goals. Data use involves setting goals. It's not just looking at data or paying attention to it. It's having some goals that you're striving to achieve. Cafeteria workers can do that. Custodians can do that. Superintendents can do that.
I was just going to say, who gets to rate you? Besides the school committee.
Everybody.
Is there a vehicle whereby, people in your administration and, principals and other, leaders in the schools, are they providing you feedback? Are they giving you, kind of a grade on this?
Yes, they are. All of them are, and in many different ways. And there's subtle ways, right, sometimes, and there's sometimes direct ways. I get emails from people too. But almost every time, Teddy, that we have meetings, and certainly meetings that I'm involved in or that I run, we ask people for feedback, and we give them a forum or a form to provide that feedback anonymously. Right, every single meeting that we run, right?
I was just going to ask that. Can they do so anonymously?
It's important. It's critically important to do that, because you have to create an environment where people feel safe to provide feedback, particularly critical feedback. But if you pay attention to the feedback you get, particularly if it's critical feedback, and you work to improve that, that is another key to success. And it's part of a culture of continuous improvement. The school committee ultimately rates the superintendent, but I ask for feedback from school leaders, from teachers, from everyone. And once a year, at least once a year, I'll put out an anonymous survey to all leaders in the district to provide me direct feedback.
All right. I would imagine, and I kind of touched on this, but with so many people there has to be some level of opposition to this. Folks are saying
Sure.
it's a waste of time.
Sure.
What's the main criticism of this, and why however many people think that is? Is it a big number?
No, it's not. But you keep on me about this, because I'll tell you why. If there's not a great deal of opposition, or I haven't heard much resistance to it yet, that's a sign that we have not gone far enough with it yet. The superintendent's talking about this stuff. He talks about it in various places. He sends out emails to staff, but there might not be some people who object to it who are paying attention yet, right? And as we go deeper with this and as we get into it more, people will provide opposition to it. One example that's a common one, I'll give you a common one. In a growth mindset, if you believe that you can persist, and when you persist as a professional, that the students will learn. When you give a test and a child fails that test, you need to be open to reteaching and then giving the kid the exam again, or a different version of the exam, to let them have a second shot at it, right? Some teachers will say, "Are you kidding me? I gave that test. The kid should have studied for the test. They flunked it. That's the end of it. They get a bad grade." If you believe in the child, and if you believe that what's important is that the child learns, and you give them a second chance at that test and they do really well, then you have achieved as a teacher that the child made the learning that we wanted them to make. And yes, the kid gets that grade. There can be opposition to that. That's common.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because one of my biggest complaints in school was, and you always had oh, he's an easy grader, or she's a tough grader, or whatever. But I always thought if you gave an exam, and there were many cases where the average class grade, and I was in honors classes, believe it or not, people, I was. But, where the average class grade was 73, and the teacher would say to the student, that's disappointing. Like, well, I always thought, well, if the average class grade is 73, and it's not just me, it's a bunch of other very intelligent kids, and maybe you didn't teach it well enough, or in a way that the student could understand it. I know that's hard for teachers and educators to hear, but is there some level of that where you're sitting in the superintendent's office?
Absolutely. Teddy, you as a student, and you go back to those, you'd really enjoy being a student in a culture of continuous improvement, because the teachers would have felt if half a dozen students or more failed my exam, I didn't get to those students, and I need to think about part of the disposition of being responsible. I've got to think about how to get back to those students and bring them on board, and the sooner the better.
All right. We'll leave it here.
Okay.
All right. But I appreciate I have a better understanding now of what the culture of continuous improvement is. Hopefully people out there watching do as well. And most importantly, hopefully it starts to show in the students' results.
Right. I do want to say, Teddy, as we finish, I'll say more about it, and I hope you'll ask me more about it in future shows. It can't be vague. So for people who didn't catch it, we're talking about specific dispositions, intentional collaboration, growth mindset, and being responsible, taking responsibility. And then we're talking about specific practices or structures that will help us to get this going. Please do ask me more about it.
Which reminded me of perhaps the most important question. What's a parent's role in this?
Great question. Yeah. So
I'm going to guess the student success is in large part due to what happens at home. So what's the role of the parent, or whoever the parenting figure is in a particular student's life? What do they need to know?
Right. So they need to know all of it. So each month when I send a message to the staff, I also time it to be roughly the same time of the month that we send out the Lowell, the LPS connector. Yep. So we send out a communication to all families. And each month this year, I've been including in there, my message to staff is on the culture of continuous improvement. If we talk, for example, about a growth mindset, meaning the teacher has to believe that the student can be successful. If I, as a teacher, figure out the best strategy, and I persist and give the kid more time and more support. We say the same thing to the parent. You have to say, mom and dad, you have to believe that your child can be successful in school, and you have to relay messages like that at home. You have to give them a quiet place to do their homework, etc., etc., etc. The roles are there for everybody in our community to participate.
All right. Superintendent of Lowell Schools, Liam Skinner, thank you as always for joining us. We'll catch you next month. We'll continue to delve into this with some of your visits, and we'll get into some of the controversial stuff in the school committee meetings as well.
Great. Look forward to it. Thank you again, Teddy. Great opportunity for me, and I appreciate your interest.
Always happy to get some information out there. Thank you to School Superintendent Liam Skinner. Thank you to you as well for tuning in to another Inside Lowell Daily Pulse. As we like to say, if Lowell is your home, Inside Lowell is your place. Till next time, everybody stay safe, and we'll catch you on the other side.